What is up, guys? It is Quinn here, back with another video, and today I'm going to be talking about 5 tips to dominate your early season trades. So a few days ago, maybe like a week ago, I talked about 5 tips to dominate, the early part of your fantasy season. Some of these tips are going to be similar, but it's going to be much more locked in on the trade component. I talked about in that video, I think the best opportunity to make trades, to make successful trades for your team is within the first few weeks of the season. I think you can take advantage of some of your league mates a little bit, not in like an obnoxious way where, you're giving a guy a terrible offer because he doesn't know what he's talking about. People who are, they know a decent amount about fantasy football. I still think you can get some nice values off of those players. So I'm going to jump through with 5 specific tips. If you guys are watching and you enjoy the content, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be putting out content, all throughout the season, basically daily, maybe a few videos each day. So, like, subscribe, really helps me out. And then if you have any fantasy questions, week 1 start sits, draft advice, trade advice, waivers, whatever it is, just drop a comment. I'll be getting back to every single person. And just do me a favor, give me like the scoring setting, or, if it's like a look at my team, give me, how many teams in the league, roster construction, all of that. Just helps me give you guys the best answer, the most informed answer. Enough of me talking. Let's jump into the actual part of the video. So tip number 1 is going to be capitalize on overreacting league mates. Everyone knows this who's in a semi-casual league, your home league, maybe, you're playing with some guys from the office, whatever it is. There are going to be players who wildly overreact early on in a season. They'll draft a guy within the first few rounds, and that player maybe has a rough week 1, week 2, and all of a sudden they're panicking. They're like, oh, this guy's terrible. They want to move him off your team. You have to find those players and take advantage of it. I think this happens to even people who are somewhat locked in. An example I keep bringing up was last season, week 1. Pretty sure it was Thursday Night Football, like first game of the year. It was Buccaneers Cowboys. Both offenses looked good. A ton of wide receivers were producing. The Buccaneers had a solid day. Tom Brady, great passing performance. Antonio Brown played well. I think Gronk caught like 2 touchdowns or something. Chris Godwin had a solid game. The one guy who did not play well from the Buccaneers was Mike Evans. People were overreacting. They're like, oh, Mike Evans, he's the number 3 on this team. AB's ahead of him. Godwin's ahead of him. They're like, oh, he's going to have low volume, all this stuff about Mike Evans. When coming into the season, we should have known this about the Bucs offense. They were going to have a lot of stud weapons. Some guys were going to have these monster weeks. Other guys may struggle at some point. He had one bad game, and people were ready to write him off. I remember seeing people who had kind of faded him in the offseason. They weren't really interested in him. They were victory lapping that take after week 1. And these are people who, make content for fantasy football. So not your, normal casual league player, someone who truly is invested. So overreacting is a real thing. You want to find those league mates. You want to try to get those underperforming players off of them. Obviously, if a player just sucks and, the usage is bad, they're not being targeted, then you don't want to trade them. But if you know a guy's a stud, you are confident they're a good player, and maybe, the volume just hasn't translated to production, go after those players, find the league mates who are going to panic and make some moves. The second tip connects directly to the first tip, and it is going to be don't be that overreacting league mate. You want to find those league mates. You don't want to be that guy. Sometimes the season doesn't start off great. Maybe you're 0-2, maybe you're 0-3. You can be an 0-3 team for fantasy football and still have a decent shot at making the playoffs. You can be an 0-3 team for fantasy football and still have a very good team. If you're in head-to-head scoring, it's possible you've just gotten unlucky. You've gone up against the highest scoring team. I know that happens sometimes. Sometimes your team will not be that great. You'll have a really solid record, but you're looking at like the points for, points against. You've kind of just lucked out on your opponents. It can totally happen the other way where you're scoring a ton of points, you're just getting unlucky with bad matchups. I never understand the logic of like, oh, this team isn't working, I got to switch it up. Let's not try to mastermind this thing. You're not like a, NFL GM. You don't need to blow up the team, go into a full-on rebuilding mode. Like I see people talk about like, oh, I got to shake it up. You don't always need to shake it up. Sometimes you can stick through it. If you drafted a guy, you feel confident in that player heading into the season, you should not be shaken after 1 or 2 weeks of the NFL season. You should still feel confident in why you drafted that player, obviously barring like extreme circumstances. But you guys know what I'm kind of getting at here. So find the overreacting league mates. Don't be one yourself. you want to be trading with those guys. You don't want to be the one that people are taking advantage of. Tip number 3 here is going to be don't make trades to make trades. That may seem counterintuitive when I'm talking about a trade video, and I do think you should, be making trades early on in the season, but don't be making these trades where you're just trying to flip up your roster for no reason, right? I'll see some people actually comment like trade ideas in the comment section, and it's like, here's this wide receiver and this running back for this wide receiver and this running back. Look at my rankings. It's like the wide receivers are ranked back to back. The running backs are ranked back to back. Like, it seems like a lateral move. I'm not someone who loves lateral moves. Like, I want to feel like I'm winning the trade. If it's like, this is a close one, it's probably not a move you really want to make. Another thing that I think is common is if you play in only like 1 or 2 leagues, I feel like people kind of become stir crazy with their rosters. So if I'm playing in like 5, if I'm playing like 5 redraft leagues or 10 redraft leagues, everyone's in a different number of leagues. But if I'm in, like 5 to 10 leagues, I have a bunch of different players. My rosters all look different. So maybe I've made, 2 trades after 1 week. That may feel like a lot of trades to me because I'm in like 5 leagues. But if you're in 1 league, you may be sitting there just looking at the same roster. Every time you check your phone, you're looking at the exact same players. You want to shake it up. Just fight the urge to do that. If there's not a real point in making a trade, don't go out there just trying to flip these players, because I feel like you're going to eventually just start to lose each trade little by little, and then your team is going to start to deteriorate. So if you think, you're going to get put in that spot where you're going to get kind of stir crazy with your own roster, maybe you just want to jump into, 1 or 2 extra leagues to just kind of, occupy your time so you're not so locked in on one singular roster. I do think that's when a lot of people start to panic and make these random trades for no reason, is when they are in very, very few leagues, which is cool if you're fine with that. Like if you want to be in 1 or 2 leagues, totally cool, not dissing that. But I do think it's just something you got to watch out for because you are so locked in on that 1 or 2 rosters. Now moving over to tip number 4, this is going to be for leagues with more shallow formats or leagues with fewer teams. So if you are in a league that has like the 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a flex, a tight end, whatever, defense, kicker, this is the type of league I'm talking about. This could be for 12 team, also just like a 10 team league, even if your rosters are a little bit bigger. 8 team is the same thing. 2-for-1 trades are very, very important. When you're in these shallow leagues, depth is not as important because it's not like you're flexing 3-4 options, right? You've got, you're probably playing like 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 3 running backs. So if you come into your draft, you have a fantastic draft, your team's looking good, you probably have, right, in like a 10 or 12 team league, you probably have 3 options you may feel confident flexing into your lineup, not to mention the potential guys you may be able to pick up off the waiver wire. You're probably bringing in some more startable options. So this is when you want to make those 2-for-1 trades. Don't just deteriorate your entire depth where you're left with just garbage cans on your bench, because that's not going to be good once we get into bye weeks. Injuries happen, all of that stuff. But like, you don't want to be one of these teams where it's like, oh, look at my bench, and you've got like Devonta Smith, Rashad Bateman, you got all these stud wide receivers, you've got a James Cook, because it's nice. You probably drafted really well, but you want to take advantage of that good draft and start packaging those players. So maybe you're taking your flex option and one of those solid bench pieces, and you're turning that into, an upgrade at the wide receiver 2 position or an upgrade at the running back 2 position. I think that's very, very important, and I think that's something that you guys can get done early on in the season. I think people will look at a trade, they'll be like, oh, I'm getting 2 players, these guys are both solid, and they'll make the trade when in reality they're not considering the fact that like they're going to have to go release someone off their roster. They're probably downgrading their starting lineup as a whole. So just something to look out for there. 2-for-1 trades if you're in shallower leagues or, smaller leagues with fewer teams. And then the 5th and final tip is going to be active in trade discussions. So that may seem counterintuitive to my number 3, where I'm like, don't make trades to make trades. Being in trade discussions does not mean, you're making an insane amount of trades. It just means you're having some conversations, you're throwing some ideas out there, you're chopping it up with some of your league mates. And this isn't even necessarily a tip, to help kind of upgrade your team. In my opinion, this is something that can help you in the long run. Just building these relationships with your league members. And that may sound like a little bit cheesy, you probably know these guys, but just knowing someone as a friend or a coworker, it's not the same thing when you get to fantasy football, because I'm in like a home league with some of my buddies and I'll send them trade offers, and it's like, I'll see them, talk to them, and they won't even respond to my trade offers, right? Like some of these people are not super active. So that's just kind of something you want to figure out, because maybe mid-season you need to make a move. You kind of want to know what players in your league are active, what guys, when you send them an offer, they're either going to accept, decline, or maybe they're going to counter it. They're going to, chop it up in the messages, kind of fix the deal, whatever, they'll counter offer. You want to find the players who are going to be willing to deal with you and make offers. You want to weed out those guys who you're going to send the offer and it's just going to sit there and expire after 48 hours. So that's what I mean about being active. That doesn't mean, you're throwing out these terrible offers like give me Christian McCaffrey for David Montgomery. You don't want to be that guy. But, like I talked about with the other tips, find players who underperformed, try to, capitalize on these overreacting league mates. So send an offer and then just kind of see what type of league mate that is. So just kind of setting up a foundation for the future when you do want to make trades later on in the season. I think it is a helpful tip. So those are my 5 tips to dominate your early season trades. Like I said, most important time of the season to trade, trust me. So just running through them again, capitalize on overreacting league mates. Don't be an overreacting league mate. Don't make trades just to make trades. Make sure there's a purpose there. 2-for-1 trades in shallow leagues, smaller leagues, very, very important. And then be active in trade discussions. That's going to wrap it up for this one. If you guys did enjoy the content, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Like I said, any questions, drop those down below. I think this is going to be coming out on Thursday morning, so we have football tonight. So very excited for that. What is it? Bills, Rams. Hopefully that's a good game. Thank you guys for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.